Hello and welcome to 24-Hour Bosses Creators Juice. I want to welcome you all to 24-Hour Boss show today. We're going to have a great show today. Of course, this is the show where we discuss content creation, podcasting, and also we also discuss technology. And I want to welcome you today to this show. We have a great show. We're going to be talking about some legal matters. But I want to say if you're watching this video, if you could like this video, share this video. Also, as we get into this discussion, go ahead and comment. Also, if you have questions for our guests, I encourage you to ask questions for her because she is definitely a wealth of knowledge. If this is your first time here, please follow. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, as we will definitely have more guests and more great content coming. So I want to say I appreciate all of you joining and watching. And good evening, Women Who Wives. Michael, Brother Michael, good evening to you as well. Appreciate you all being here. But we have like I said, we have an excellent show. I'm not going to bore your patience today, but my guest today, she is a keynote speaker, an author. She is also a Houston-based attorney. She is a former educator who turned to a lawyer. I've had her on my show. It was about a year ago. We had a great conversation, and I brought her back today to discuss some legal matters live. And of course, today we're going to be talking about protecting your creative content. But I want to welcome my friend, my sister, to the 24-Hour Boss Creators Juice version of the show. Temi, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be back. Hi, everyone. Hello,
Great
hello.
to have you, ma'am. Appreciate you being here today.
It is my pleasure. Always a pleasure.
I know it is. It's always a pleasure to have you. And I want to say welcome to you. I want to say I appreciate your time today, of course. And I know you are a busy woman doing so many things, but I appreciate you making time for me today and my guests and my audience. So I want to just go ahead and get ready to dive into it. But I guess for those who don't know you, Temi, I usually ask for my guests to give like an interesting fact about themselves. But of course, I'm just going to have you just maybe talk about you being a first generation Nigerian American, and maybe you can talk about your name and also, why you were honored to live out your dreams from those who came before you. So I'll just go ahead and let you speak from that vantage point.
Sure thing. Sure thing. Well, my full name. It's funny. I don't think I've ever said my full name on one of on anything before. So I'm gonna go full Nigerian.
Let's go.
Full.
Let's go.
So my whole name, and my mom, if she watches this, can correct it, but it's Temi Oluwatoyin Aduni Siyanbade. So that's like my last name is Siyanbade. Temi is my first name. And all of the other things are middle names, and so
Wow.
The first, yeah, and I love my names, and I love the way the Yoruba culture treats names. So Yoruba is a tribe that is located in Nigeria, well, predominantly in Nigeria. It's spread all over the globe, honestly, and so that's the language that my parents spoke. And so our names have a lot of meaning and have a lot of depth, and so I love my name. My first name, Temi Tuckwa, I go by Temi for short, but that name means mine is worthy of praise, and so I think it works well with me. I'm kind of an optimist, and I try to find a reason to be thankful in every situation. I try to live a life of gratitude and appreciation, and my other names kind of go with that. So Oluwatoyin means God is the only one worthy of praise.
Mm.
Aduni means sweet to have, and so I try to like cultivate that, and I think that that is my life, and so it's really cool to come from that rich culture, and just again thinking about where my parents. So my parents were not born in the United States; they were born in Africa, specifically Nigeria, and so I was born here. So I'm a first gen. Some people would say second generation, but I always say first generation Nigerian American. So I have my Nigerian culture that influences one subset of the way that I see things, in my American culture that also influences it. So I have this kind of dynamic opportunity to see the world through various lenses. And I think that it impacts the way I kind of see going after goals, the way I see ambition, the way I see the way we treat culture. Just a whole lot of different things are impacted from that. So that's a snippet about me and all my names.
Well, you definitely have an interesting name. I think I told you before I had to practice saying your name because I was like, okay, how does she pronounce the name? I had to watch a few of your YouTube videos just to get it down right.
Well, you're doing a great job, and I try to make it straightforward. So I tell people, just call me Tammy. It's Amy with a T. So that's I
Amy
keep
with the
it
T.
simple. Yep.
There y'all go. Amy with the T. Have you let me ask, have you been back to Nigeria? Have you visited recently or maybe in the past few years or anything like that?
Not recently. The last time I went was 2007, and that was actually surprisingly the only time I went. So the interesting thing for me is that I've grown up in the Nigerian culture, like in Rhode Island, where I was born and raised. I was there for the first few years of my life. I was very involved in the Nigerian community, so I understand our language. I eat our foods. And so even now in Houston, if anybody's been to Houston, Houston's a little bit like a little Nigeria to me. There's just a ton of Nigerians, but people are usually surprised to find out, particularly other Nigerians, because again, I understand the language. I can fake a really great Nigerian accent. So people are usually like, oh,
Hmm.
yeah, she must have been born and raised there. And I'm like, no, I've spent 3 weeks of my life, an amazing 3 weeks. I did get sick while I was there, but it was still amazing. um, but yeah, so the last time I was there was 2007, and it is something that I do want to definitely go back to. I have extended family members there, so my immediate family, my parent, my mom, and my siblings, and my grandmother are here. So I think that's part of the reason why I haven't made it back as
Right.
frequently as I probably would.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely got to stay connected to mom and close to mom. So awesome. Well, thank you
Exactly.
for sharing that information and with our audience. We appreciate that. Definitely. I love the fact that you say you live a life of gratitude and not only that, but your name also has the meaning of God gives all the praise. So I mean, who else deserves the praise but God? So that is awesome and wonderful. Okay, so Tammy, I know we talked when I had you on before, and I just want you to kind of speak from this. And it's about owning your zero because I know you brought it up in the last time we recorded. We talked about owning your zero and also trusting the process. So I guess I want you to speak from the reality of feeling unaccomplished in the process, and maybe you can talk about owning your zero and what that means and just the process itself.
Absolutely. Now, I wish I could take credit for that brilliant phrasing. But my I heard that phrase "owning your zero" from someone who I consider a sister slash mentor. Her name is Vivian. She's the owner and founder and CEO of a company called Notiq, Notiq. And we were talking about business and we were talking about life. And I was in a stage and a time in my life where I just felt like I was at zero. It was kind of like starting all over. One of the things some people have pointed out to me, I kind of didn't realize this, but I tend to um, I transition. I move from one thing to another. I don't like to be put in a box. And so it was one of those transition periods, and it felt like zero. And she just was encouraging me that there was a lot of opportunity in that place of zero. And that place of zero is when you're brand new to something. And I think whether it be starting your podcast, starting a business, starting a new type of educational path, it can be hard. It's funny that this is coming up because I just was talking to another friend of mine recently who is an accomplished professional, who has also done a couple of transitions in professions and is thinking about another transition. And she too was at this place where it's like, oh, this is uncomfortable. I'm scared. I'm nervous. And that's that place of zero. But the beautiful thing about owning your zero is that if you embrace those things that make you new, those things that are kind of unfamiliar, you have a few different opportunities. One opportunity is you can be a little obscure in your mistakes. So when you're brand new, you don't have a huge platform where everybody can see everything that you're doing. You can try more things. The other thing is that people really actually do want to help you. It might be hard to find those folks, but there are. I don't even think it's that hard. I think that we get nervous about asking, but there are people who want to help because everyone who has become anything remembers their place of zero. And so that's a unique opportunity to be able to say, hey, I need help, and a place where people are probably more willing to help than when you are a little bit more established. And so there's just a couple of things about just starting afresh. And then you also get the opportunity to enter whatever that realm is, whatever that thing is that you're doing new, you get to bring a new perspective to it. So there might be a way that people have always done it. Doesn't mean that that's always the right way. Come in with your questions. Ask why. Ask what. What is the history? And so I think that just owning your zero just can be just immensely powerful. I've found that again, whether it be me transitioning from one career path to another or a practice area to another, owning my zero allows me to ask questions without shame. And I think that's the heart of it. I think when you own your zero, you release yourself from the shame that so many people carry when they're brand new at something. It's a shame that we all tend to feel, but we don't need to embrace and carry. It's something we can reject because we can remind ourselves that everybody has to start at some place. And so I guess that's what I want to leave you with, as we're talking about owning your zero and trusting the process and that feeling of like, I haven't done anything yet. Just that's okay. The fact is, that means you're doing something. A lot of people don't actually ever experience or feel that newness because they're not taking risk.
Mm,
They're staying safe.
yeah.
If you've gotten to a place where you're unfamiliar with being nervous, you're unfamiliar with learning something new, you're in a room where you know more than everyone else, then it's probably time for you to think about expanding because you're probably stagnant. You're
Mm,
probably in a place where you've become complacent. And I just want to encourage you to say, are there opportunities for me to have newness, seek some type of new knowledge, new experience, something like that.
yeah. Yeah, and that's good because I wanted to, I guess I wanted to kind of start this conversation out with that because I know when we talked before, and of course you pivoted from being a teacher to a lawyer, but even when you became a lawyer, I know you talked about it how you felt like you felt unaccomplished or like what am I doing, and so and I think we all get to that point where it's like you don't feel like you're making your mark, I guess you could say, but it's good to
Mm,
know that you can own as zero because like you said before, we don't start out at 10, right? We don't start out on 100. You got to start someplace and you grow from there. But that's why I wanted you to kind of talk about that. So thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so now let's talk about some business stuff. So okay, so I want to start a online business or e-commerce business, or I guess like you say it's a business, right? But what are some of those things, what are some of those boxes that needs to be checked or that we need to make sure that we cover if we're going to start an online business, e-commerce? What are some of those things that we need to do?
excellent question. Excellent question. And so, whenever people ask me about this, about e-commerce businesses or online businesses, there are two components. And I like to start with one that I think is consistent, which is it's a business,
Mm,
right? If whether it be e-commerce, online, that's just a location, but the heart is that it's still a business. And so the things that kind of exist for any other business will still exist for your e-commerce or your online business. What are those things? Well, you probably want some type of entity protection, right? You want to decide, am I going to be an LLC or a corporation? You're going to want to think about things like the name that you're choosing for your business. You want to think about branding and the legalities that are attached to that. You want to think about making sure that your assets are protected. So the things that you purchase in connection with the business, what are the ways that you can protect those things? So that might also include just making sure you're keeping your records clean. So your financials, not mixing your business account with your personal account. That's something that you want to keep in mind for any business, but especially again on the e-commerce space. I think what ends up happening is that there are times where you can get really excited about starting an e-commerce business, and it feels easier. But in that, like, oh, let's just get started, it can be possible to forget that you're starting a business still. And so I like to highlight again all of the elements that are important for a business. Now, I'll also say this in terms of moving a little bit aside from the legalities, is just like, also remember it's a business. So you are exchanging some type of good or service for a return, for revenue, for profit. And I want you to think about the business structure. So one of the things that I think is interesting for me when I approach the legalities is I am an attorney. So I'm always thinking about the law, and I'm thinking about risk. I'm thinking about how do we allocate those things. But I also like to think about, are you building something that's profitable? And I like to bring people back to the place of, I want you to think about um, your business structure. I want you to think about your marketing. I want you to think about your framework. I want you to think about what exactly you have in place to make sure that whatever you are creating is profitable, right? Because if you're in business, you should be trying to work towards that. So keep that in mind when we're talking about business. Now, a couple of things when we're talking about the online space, and actually almost fully in the online space. I just really like to iterate this too, the bank account thing. I
Yeah.
want you to make sure that you have a separate bank account. That becomes a legality issue. It helps for two things. So when you're going back and you're trying to keep track of your taxes and you're trying to make sure that everything is in order, it's going to be easier to say, okay, these are the expenses and the income for the business if you have some type of separate business account. So it's going to make it easier for you to file your taxes. Then let's say there's something that happens with your business and somebody tries to sue you, or you want to sue someone, or something happens where you're in court. One of the things that creating an LLC or creating a corporation helps you to do is it helps you to limit the liability, which is the legal responsibility that you have in terms of paying for things. It limits it to what is in the business's name. Now, if you don't have an LLC formed and you don't have a separate bank account, then all your personal assets are on the line. But if you do have that separate business, or and you've created that LLC or corporation, and you have that separate bank account, the court can look to those things and say, you know what, it looks like this person has actually created a separate entity from themselves, and they're treating it like a separate entity. And so we're going to limit their liability to what they've put inside of it. That's kind of the way to think about it. Now, there are a few exceptions when they can say, you know what, even though you have the LLC and you have the separate bank account, we're going to reach over into it. And those instances are when you have like tried to commit fraud, or you've done something really, really bad.
Mm.
Um, so as long
Mm-mm.
as you're not doing anything bad, you should be good. So that's the bank account thing. And the other thing with the bank account is, like, if you're starting a business, make it easy for people to give you money. Like, people be like, I'm saving, I'm selling stuff. All right, I want to buy what you have. And then they only have one means of collecting money. It's like, can you cash app me? No shame, no shade to cash app or anything. But for me, I'm like, one of the things is I want people to be able to pay me in any currency. Like, let me set up all the different streams so that it's easier for people to pay me. And so I like for folks to think about that when they're starting their online businesses or their e-commerce businesses or any businesses. That, have you also thought about the ways in which you will receive, since this is an exchange? Um, Other thing, online, because we're talking online and e-commerce space, few other considerations is you're going to have to think about where you're selling and the tax implications for that. That's a little bit complicated, so I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts of that or the nitty gritty, but just understand that there are various things, various tax schemes from state to state. Different states have different rules about what's taxed, and it can be a little messy. If you're using a platform like Shopify or using some of these other platforms that are built recognizing the complexities of these different commerce spaces, sometimes they have tools within them to kind of help you. So just consider that, but you're going to want to pay attention to whatever it is that you're selling. So, for example, then in some states, there's no taxes associated with selling services, whereas in other states, there are taxes associated with that, right? And so you're going to have to understand that with regards to your local laws, but then also from an online perspective, kind of think about how that impacts the way you charge. Sometimes people just kind of do a blanketed thing so that they're able to know that they've taken care of that. Some people rely on the defaults that kind of come through with their different platforms. So that's that with regards to taxation. And the final thing I was going to say is privacy policies and terms and conditions. So if you're online, you're typically getting people's data, even if you're not consciously doing it. But like if you're getting somebody's name, you get somebody's email address, like something as simple as that, that's somebody's personal data. And the law is here and they regulate the collection and exchange of people's personal information. One of the ways that they do that is they mandate that if you're collecting anybody's information, that you make sure you have a privacy policy on your website. If you have a e-commerce business and you don't have a privacy policy, or you have an app or something like that, you are right now in violation. So you need to
Uh-oh.
look into that. Yeah, you need to make sure you have a privacy policy. Um, the terms and conditions, or the terms of use, that's more of like an agreement that kind of tells your users and your browsers, the people who are using your stuff, your visitors on your website, these are the rules that I've put into place as to how you should conduct yourself on my website. So I think that that's equally important. So I know I've gone off on a tangent because that's kind of a big question, but I wanted to
Great
like
advice.
flag, yeah, and highlight
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And again, for those that are maybe just joining, we're talking with Temi Siyanbade. She's a Houston-based attorney, and we're talking about protecting your creative content. So if you do have questions, yeah, like I said, put them in the comments, and we're getting some comments in here that everybody's saying great advice, great info. I do
Awesome.
have some questions as you were talking there, Tammy. So if somebody has a YouTube page, or maybe not a YouTube page, maybe they have a social media channel, if they are making money, they should consider that a business. Is that right?
I think that they should, because the thing is that it is a business. The thing is that there are different levels of how complex you can organize and arrange your business. But if you are creating something and you're receiving profit for it, it is a business. Now, is it a sole proprietorship, which means that you haven't done anything to formally structure it? That's what it probably is if you haven't thought about it. But if you are receiving money for putting something out there, you're in business. It just simply so you get to decide again how much protection you want to kind of add to that. So I will say this: I don't think the issues or the things that I stated with regards to taxation don't necessarily apply to something like a YouTube channel that you have or a podcast that you have. It can, but in this particular thing where you're on a platform that is paying you for creating content like YouTube, right? Um, they are the ones who are more concerned with the taxation. You have to pay your taxes when you're filing your taxes. So you'll receive some type of payout. They'll pay you periodically, and you need to report to the IRS the income that you've made. When you're setting up your things, particularly on a platform like YouTube, they are asking you for your tax information, your tax ID info. They're asking you what type of business you form. So if it's sole proprietor, they'll recognize that, but they'll still be getting that information because they know that they are in business with you. Now, if you want to formalize it, if you want a little bit more structure so that if there were ever some type of legal issues, you can create an LLC or a corporation that is the business that YouTube is engaging with, right? As you are creating your content. So, but you are in business if you are getting paid to do this.
Getting
It's
paid. If you monetize, getting paid, it's a business.
mm-hmm.
So they should maybe make it official, I guess, and file a business name or a business license. And I mean, you're making money, right? Like you said, might as
I
well.
think so. I think that there's opportunities. So when you start doing that, right? And I mean, some people are not interested. And I will say this: I I think broadly that you're in business, but there are some IRS standards, but it's not a cut and dry rule. That's why I say that
Right.
you are in business. The IRS gets to decide whether they think that you have a hobby or whether you're in business. And I'll have to come back and kind of like talk about what those distinctions are. But for the most part, if you're collecting money from the YouTube, I would consider that a business, and I would encourage you to start thinking about formalizing certain things. So, for example, Do you have a specific name that you've put out there for the world to kind of recognize your brand, that has some type of equity, that is notable? That would be something that I would want to make sure is secure, that nobody else can come and kind of copy, or that
Hmm.
nobody else can come and try and profit from, because you've put in work to create your content. Right. And so those are one of the things that I'm like, that would be part of that would be a business asset for me. That would be something that I'm looking back at, and I'm looking at what I've created and I'm saying this is valuable. Just in general, like my
Right.
approach to when I'm talking to my clients about these different things is, I want folks to value what they create, and
Hmm.
from that place of valuing what they create, protect it.
Protected.
A
Right.
lot of people aren't protecting what they create because they don't value what they create. So, what does that mean? That means you're maybe, for example, you have created an amazing platform that people know about, that they come and they get information on, right? Maybe like the 24-hour boss, right? Like, you have this platform
24
that
hour
people are
boss.
coming to.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right? And you're growing and people are knowing this thing. You want to make sure that you have the opportunity to exclusively use that. So first thing, you want to check and make sure that nobody else is using it, because one thing that has happened, that happens to people, is sometimes you're accidentally copying someone. You think you're the first person to have this idea, but somebody else had the idea. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to check and make sure I'm the only person using this. How do you check that? I mean, ideally, you're going to an attorney who's going to be able to do a comprehensive search for you. Things that people kind of do in the interim, that it's not sufficient, but people do it to get started, is people will check to make sure that the domain name is secure. People will check on social media to make sure that the different types of social handles are secure. So all of those are hints towards the fact that this thing might not exist and nobody else has this brand out there. But you want to make sure, again, that this is something that is a valuable platform that you've created. You want to protect it. Maybe also your content. So maybe you are a blogger, right? And you've written out all these blogs, or maybe you have your vlog series, so all your video blogs. Maybe you have photos that you've taken. You have all of this creative stuff that you've created, right? But it's not protected, so anybody can come and kind of use it, and if they do use it, you usually, when people try to protect their stuff after it's already been abused, it's usually too late. So let's say somebody steals one of your pictures on Instagram and reposts it as their own. Instagram is going to be asking you, what's your copyright registration, what's your trademark registration on
Mm.
whatever it is that you're saying somebody has used. And if you don't have that stuff, then you're going to be limited. They're probably not going to take down whatever that person has copied, because you haven't adequately protected it. So I guess I gave two examples, but what I want to say, or what I want people to kind of take away from this, is I want you to take an inventory of what you've created. And I don't want you to limit it. So we talk broadly about your names, the business names that you create, and the logos that you have, and content that people create. But I even want people to think about the workbooks that they create. If you're a coach or something like that, I want you to think about the courses that you create. If you're a course creator, I want you to think about all the different ways you add value, and I want you to start getting an inventory of those things. The reason why I want you to do that is, one of my personal missions. It's a silent one. I don't talk about it, but I feel like there's so many people who create so much valuable stuff and they don't bet on themselves, and then they give their stuff away to other people, right? And then down the line, their things become super valuable, but they've already given all that stuff up. Whereas if people owned and organized and structured what they created up front, the conversations that they would be having with people wouldn't be conversations about ownership. It would be conversations about licensing. And what does that
Mm.
do? That enables you to retain ownership, right? So that as you scale, so that as you grow, so that as your stuff that is going to gain and become more valuable begins to kind of grow in that value, you're still benefiting from that, instead of losing the value that you actually invested so that somebody else can get it. So there's a whole, I could go down that whole rabbit hole. I'm very passionate about that. But that's why I talk about own what you create, own what you create, own what you create, own what you create, because I think it's super important.
Wow. Yeah, that's so true. Because there's a lot out there, and your ideas can be stolen and all that stuff. And that's something that you can help people with, right? As far as like licensing and owning, that those type of things, right, Tammy?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I want to, because I think sometimes stories help with this. So I just want to give a handful of stories just so that people can see, like, oh, this is what she's talking about. I'm just
Certainly.
gonna throw out some names. Dave Chappelle had a situation, right? Dave Chappelle's the Chappelle Show, right? There was a whole time when he was upset with Netflix, right? Because was it Netflix? Because they were trying to use his what he created, but that he didn't know, and he was like, I invested in all this. Why am I not getting paid? The same thing happened to Nick Cannon. Nick Cannon created Wild 'N Out, right? He had some issues, and then all of a sudden, it was like, well, they fired him from the show he created. And then you go back
Wow.
and look at the contract, he signed away his rights to it. Everything in that show was Nick Cannon, but he signed it all away. So they were within their power to do that. The one that breaks my heart the most, I think, or one of the stories that one, and it's again, this happens to a ton of people, but this story just hurts me for the person involved. Is there was a young lady, her name was Haley Page, and she was a wedding designer, and she started her Instagram page and would show all these beautiful wedding dresses that she designed. They were gorgeous. And so I remember I used to follow her because I just thought her dresses were beautiful. And while she was creating these things and curating this beautiful Instagram following and this beautiful Instagram presence, she was growing in notoriety. People knew her, but she was working for another company. Now, in working for that other company, she did not pay attention to what the contract said that she signed with them.
Mm.
When relations broke down between her and her employer, she said, okay, let me part ways. And they said, okay, go ahead, but don't take your name with you. She was like, excuse me, what do you mean?
Whoa.
And they're like, yeah, your Instagram page with all the designs that you've made and what you've made famous, we own that. And she was
Oh,
like, no, no,
wow.
no, and right now they're still in litigation, and she is unable to use her name. So there are videos, you can look it up, you can look
Oh,
online
man.
and see her stories. Her name's Haley Page. She's a young woman, young woman who is heartbroken because she cannot use her god-given name to produce anything because this other business owns those rights. So
Whoa.
again, I just want to put you on game so that when you're
Yeah, that's
having these
scary.
conversations, yeah, I want
Mm.
you to think about all those things. Think about think about what your contracts with your employer say, right? And the things that you're creating for them. I just want you to be like on game, like what am I creating? And when am I creating it? And can this be attributed to someone else? And just be wise about it. Do you need to make sure that you have some very clear boundaries between your side hustle and your main 9 to 5? Just you need to figure out how you want to navigate that.
Ooh, that's some scary stuff. Goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. All right. Well, we got the person here that can help us with it. Definitely. We appreciate all of that information, Tammy. And I want to go back to I want to get back to protecting your intellectual property in a moment, but I want to go back to something else you said that was important, which was privacy policies. And you were saying that if we're collecting emails and people's data, we need to make sure that we have that on our websites. Is that right?
Yes, 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 yes. And I just breezed over that, but like a couple of years ago, I don't know if everybody remembers when their email inboxes were flooded with all these people are like, we want to let you know that we've made some changes to our privacy policy. We want to make
Hmm.
some updates. It was all around the same time. Every single company you did work with was like, let me update my privacy policy. But what was going on then was there was this new, really expansive rules that were coming from the United Kingdom called the GDPR, General Data Protections Regulations Act. And so this is a broad rule that talks about data and basically, and for some people in the US, it's a lot of your bigger companies and a lot of companies could accidentally be under the purview of this law because it's about the potential clients that you're reaching out to and customers that you're reaching out to that are in the UK. And so basically, they want you to be very, very careful with the way you treat people's data for their citizens. They want you to really be intentional about what data you collect and communicating that or making that information available to the people who are on your websites. And then also kind of giving them a level of control. So giving people access and ways for them to come back and email you and say, I want my data removed or I want my data destroyed. Now the thing about that is that that happened in the UK, but it's still again if your content is if your content seems to actively kind of reach out across the waters. So for
Hmm.
example, you're selling things and you are on your website, you're like, I will collect it in pounds. I will collect it in naira. So you're asking for different currencies, right? You're opening up yourself to even more to a greater
Ooh.
finding that you need to be underneath this rule. Now that's one level, but then the other level is this European regulation is influencing regulations that are happening here in the United States of America. So we're seeing a growing number of states that are trying to make sure that they're regulating people's personal information, and understandably so. Data is the new currency, right?
Yeah.
And so you have states like California that have these rules. There's at least four or five, I think at this point, there are like four different states that have some type of privacy law that they've not recently established. California was one of the first ones. And so that's why it comes to mind immediately. But these are, again, rules that are asking you to make sure that you are very clear as to what information you're collecting, why you're collecting the information, and what the people who own that information are able to do with it. And the information is like names, it's like emails, but it's also like if your website is picking up, somebody's what's the name of that? Oh, why am I forgetting? The code in the background that kind of tells you where somebody, not where they are, but I just drew a complete blank. There is your IP address,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Okay.
So things like that. If your website is collecting that, and you're collecting maybe like the type of
Like
device somebody's
browser or
using, your
computer or yeah.
browser,
Hmm.
exactly. All of those things are data. It's personal information,
Whoa.
right? And we want you to think about that because some of these regulations are considering things, information like that as well. If you are building out a website or an application that is allowing people to maybe log in with their Facebook or log in with their Instagram or log in with one of these platforms or with Google, there is now another exchange of information happening. So what I'm saying is that this exchange of data and information is very subtle. But as you begin to engage with that, right, you are now also opening yourself up to say, I am being held to the standard of this rule because I'm engaging in this way. And all of these things that I'm talking about should be reflected in your privacy policy. Because your privacy policy is how you tell the world, this is my policy as to how I'm handling your personal and private data. And if there is a disconnect between what you have in your privacy policy and then what you're actually doing, that can create issues. So I will say this: it's become kind of hard for certain. It depends on how exposed you are. Um, the FTC, Federal Trade Commissions, they are the ones who check this and who kind of enforce some of these rules with regards to privacy policies. They've started. There was a time where they were really looking at the way influencers and larger businesses were collaborating with information and the way they were also doing endorsements and things like that. What I'm trying to say is that it's a lot for them to kind of keep up with. I think they're eventually trying to get to the little guys. I don't know how well they are with getting to the little guys yet. But if you are growing, if you are scaling, if you are moving from being a little guy to being a big guy, you should be paying attention to these things and you should be prioritizing it. And I won't even say even if you're moving there, I'm saying if you're planning on moving there, you need to make that part of your practice. There's certain things that you want to make sure you're doing continuously. So
Yes.
there's so
Whoa.
much. We're
Yeah, it's a lot.
touching
It's
on
like
so much.
data information overload right there, man. That's a whole lot. But I mean, it's good information because those are things that I don't think people consider. Like when they put a website up or all those type of things, they just think, oh yeah, get this website up, but it's a lot to it. And
Wow.
a lot of things that we got to make sure we cover and protect ourselves because we can get ourselves in trouble. So, but that's why we got you here, Tami. That's why we got you here.
So I'm trying to help everybody.
Yes,
Definitely.
ma'am. Okay, so in regards to intellectual property, now you kind of touched on trademarks, but I want you to maybe talk about copyright and patent because with trademarks, I want you to kind of tackle that in regards to podcast podcast names and all that because I know you put a video up in regards to that, but maybe you can kind of give some insight in regards to copyright. Maybe what's the best? When should a person use a copyright? When does a person need a patent? And of course with the trademark, you can talk about that too. But I want to kind of combine that with the podcast name stuff.
How about we do this? How about we start because we'll and go deeper there, but let's talk about these different types of intellectual property. Let's just talk
Certainly,
about the different buckets.
let's
And then
do
we
it.
can talk about and then yeah, because I think there's overlap, right? So um all right, let's start with copyrights. So copyrights are a type of legal right that is afforded to someone when they have a creative original work. So you can have a copyright. You have a copyright for anything original that you create in terms of if you write a book, there's a copyright already there. If you write a song, there's a copyright there. If you write the lyrics to a song, there's a copyright there. If you take a photograph, if you're a photographer, you own a copyright in the photography that you produce. If you make a video, a movie, you own the copyright to that. Any original work, there's a copyright naturally associated with it, and you have it. Now, registering your copyright is the way that you get put the world on notice, and you make sure that you've positioned yourself to enforce that copyright that you have. Now, you cannot copyright an idea. So if it's something that has not been fixed into some type of tangible format, or has not been put into something that a little bit more, again, substantive, then it cannot receive copyright protection. So, oh, I'm going to write a book about X, Y, and Z. I have an idea about this book, X, Y, and Z. There's no copyright there. But once you have sat down and you have written a manuscript and you've written out your, 600 pages, your 500, 400, 200 pages,
Mm.
100 pages, whatever, there's a copyright there. Okay. So that's how your copyrights work. And I will also say your copyrights should be some type of original work. So if you have a collection of math problems, maybe, facts, and you're just like 2 + 2 = 4,
That
four
sounds like
plus
a
four
boring book, Tammy. That sounds like a boring book.
So your boring books, that's a boring book. But your books that are just like facts,
Yeah.
like they might be a little bit harder. Not that, just a collection of facts aren't necessarily copyrightable because it's not an original work. So if you have these facts, but then you're explaining to people how to kind of, approach this, and you're saying, this is my approach for how you should
Mhm.
add, right? And you've added your now creative, original spin to it. Now you're talking something that is copyrightable. So that's your copyright bucket.
Gotcha.
Your next bucket, I'm gonna introduce your trademark bucket here, and then I'll do patent, and then I'll do trade secrets. So your
Okay.
trademark bucket of intellectual property is anything that is an identifier of the source of a good or a service. What do I mean? I mean, if you have a name that people see and associate it with something that you create, that is a trademark, right? So when people see 24-hour boss, they think of Brian Hill. That is a trademark by itself because it's an identifier. When we see Chanel, we see the two C signs. We think about maybe luxury goods. We think about clothes. We think about handbags. That mark, right? The two C's is a logo that identifies Chanel, the company, has the source of a good or a service. If we see the Nike swoosh sign, that's a logo that does that. If we hear just do it, that's a slogan that we now, if we see just do it, we associate that with a particular source, the company called Nike. So trademarks are things that are source identifiers, and they can be names, they can be logos, they can be colors, they can be sounds, they can be slogans. There's
Mm.
so many different things that can be trademarks. Now, the question is, how do I protect my trademark, right? And so we'll talk about that a little bit when we get into the podcasting. But essentially, the first and most important thing is you should be using your trademark. Like if it's not something that you're out there using, there's limited protection because you're not creating that association between you or that thing that you've created and the source, right? So there needs to be something that there's this type of again, connection between the source and the good and the service. The other thing that you do is you register trademarks. You register them. Now, there are different trademark schemes globally. So the way you handle trademarks in the United States and the laws that govern it might be different from the laws that govern trademarks in China, and they'll differ from the laws that govern India and Nigeria. All of these different countries will have different trademarks. There are some laws and treaties that kind of help them all work together. So if you're somebody who has an international brand or international business, you may want to look and you probably you not probably, you need to talk to an attorney about your strategy for your protection across these different jurisdictions, because what you do in one country could impact what happens in another country. But the protection you have in one country doesn't necessarily pass over to the protection you have in another country. So you are going to want to coordinate all of those different things together with the people that you are with an attorney, and try and make sure you're protecting yourself. But when you register a trademark, a couple of things that happen. First thing is you are putting the world on notice that, hey, this is the mark that I want to associate with myself. The other thing is that you're enabling the government to help you if somebody tries to infringe on your trademark. If you aren't registering these things, the government's not going to help you. They're going to be like, well, you waited too late, and then you'll still be allowed to register that trademark, but it's going to take a while. The other thing I want to say with regards to trademark is a trademark should be something, again, that is a distinguisher. And so it should help you be distinct in the marketplace. And the reason why I want to emphasize this is that the government affords different levels of protection based off of how distinct your mark is. So if you say, I use this example in a video I think I just posted, but if you're like, I sell microphones, and you're like, my company is called Black Microphones because I sell black microphones, the United States Patent and Trademark Office is going to look at your application and they're going to reject it because all you're doing is describing what you're selling. You're not distinguishing yourself because anybody can sell a black microphone. This is not something distinct. Now, let's say you had a podcast and it was called Black Mike, right?
Mm,
Now, that's a little bit different, right?
mm,
Because what you are actually providing is the service or the entertainment that comes through from what your podcast is. And yes, a black mic is related to it, but you're not describing your podcast, right? It's tangentially related. Now that's going to get more protection, right? Than again just a black mics to sell microphones. Now then you can take it another level. Let's talk about what things companies like Exxon and Google did. Exxon, Google, Spanx, they created a whole new word, right? What was a Spanx before? What's her name? I can't remember her name. She's amazing. Um,
yeah, I know
Sarah
you're talking about.
Blakely.
Yeah, Sarah.
Before Sarah Blakely created Spanx, what was it? Nobody knows, but she created that word. What was a Google?
Don't know.
What was Exxon? These things were fake words that were created, right? And so there's going to be a higher level of protection afforded to something that is a brand new word,
Mm,
right? Than something that is just, again, maybe something that is by association. So like, I'll give you another example. There's a maternity line called Peas in a Pod or something along those lines. And there's protection that is given to it, but it's not as distinct as if there was a brand new name. So you want to move towards getting more distinct in order to get more protection. And again, if you are just descriptive, you're not going to get that same legal protection. They're probably not going to let you register on the United States registry. So just some things to keep in mind. Trademark. So we talked about copyright. We talked about trademark. Third, patents. Patents are like inventions. So if you're inventing something novel, something that you're doing something unique with different items that has just never been created before, that's when your patents come into play. So what you'll see is I like to always use sneakers as examples because sneakers are kind of common, but when they're incorporating new technologies to provide new levels of comfort and they're doing something that allows the technology in the shoe to kind of be different, right? They can get a patent for that. So Spanx, there's a patent for Spanx because there was a new way that she was kind of getting all this fabric to work together to create shapewear for women. When you are inventing something novel, that's when you start looking at your patents. And your patents, once you've filed a patent and you've registered it, it allows you to stop other people from using that same thing and selling that other thing, right? So I want you to keep that in mind when we're talking about patents. So a lot of times I don't have a ton of clients who have a lot of patents. There have more people who are kind of growing in that, but I often find that a lot of people who reach out to me, they're more so having things that are copyrightable, trademarks, etc. But patents, again, are more inventions. And the last thing, and I know I'm saying so much because we go through so much time whenever we're here. I
I
know I
know
talk so
we
much.
do. No, you're good. It's
um,
needed. It's important.
It's a lot. But the last thing I'll say is trade secrets, and I always throw in trade secrets as something as that's intellectual property, and there's no registration associated with trade secrets, unlike your trademarks, your copyrights, and your patents. But trade secrets are the things that you do inside your business that just are unique to you, that give you a competitive edge, and there is no registration for these things. These are just unique things. Maybe you have a unique customer list, or you have a secret sauce, a secret recipe, you have a separate algorithm that you use or a separate system that is unique to you. It's your intellectual property and it should be protected as well. Now, the question is, how do I protect intellectual property like trade secrets? It's usually through contracts. So if somebody in your company is getting access to this, you want to make sure that they have some type of non-disclosure or a confidentiality agreement signed that says, hey, I'm getting exposure to this. I can't share this secret. And then I would also say it's also in the way you kind of move with your secrets. So if you're posting your secret sauce on social media, guess what? That's not a trade secret anymore because you put the whole thing out there for the world to see. It's not something that you'll be able to go
Mm.
to court and say, oh, somebody, used my trade secret. You posted it for everybody to be able to use. Like, you know, so consider those things if there are unique elements and things that give you a competitive edge. how you're protecting it, making sure you're limiting access within your company. So it's not like it's something everybody has access to. It's not something on the general company drive, but maybe it's on a special specific drive that only the executive assistants or people in the C-suite have access to. So those are your 4 buckets for intellectual property.
Oh man,
It's
that is
so
some, yeah, so
yeah.
much, but it's important, definitely. Wow. All right. I guess I want to just get out some of these comments that was coming in as you were talking. And this is Women Who Rise. She has a podcast called Women Who Rise, but she said she's in Houston. She said, so glad she's located in Houston. Definitely need to connect for more
Yay.
information. Most definitely. Uh,
Yes.
C.E. Davis says, as you were talking, teach, Tami, teach. Yes.
Hey.
And
Trying to.
yes, and Just Teach Ministries, he says, wow, with the mind blowing emoji, he said, that's awesome. You can invent words that identify your trademark. Wow, that is something I never thought about that. But like he was saying, I mean, we didn't know Google, we didn't know Spanx, and there's a whole lot of other stuff we didn't know. But you can
Yeah.
trademark those things, which is nice to know.
Or another time we'll have to talk about like the pros and cons of both. Because one of the things that I think about is it's harder to market something that you just created sometimes
Mm,
because there's no concept of it. Whereas if there's something like the car Jaguar, right? You kind of get that because what are they trying to say? They're saying this is a fast car.
yeah.
It's something you're already familiar with. So there are pros and cons to both approaches. But if you're really intentional and your product is solid, then yeah, create a brand new word, run with it because you're going to be able to have more protection for
Mm,
that than something that is kind of like using other words. But you can get protection for both of them, I should say. So
right.
there's yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, though. That makes sense. I like that. Awesome information. All right. Y'all heard what she said. She said when she comes back. So that means she's going to be back. Yes. All right. Just want to throw that out there. Okay, so in regards to podcast, so I saw your video. Wonderful, awesome, amazing video, great information. So in regards to podcast, so I guess first question, does a person, well, I guess in regards to trademark and all that, but does a person need to have an LLC for their podcast name?
I would say, oh, so that's interesting because you said for their podcast name. So let's let's
Yeah.
let's
Or for
let's
their
break this
podcast?
for their podcast. Let's talk about for
Yes.
their podcast. And the
Yes.
reason why I say for their podcast is because again, going back to that first conversation we had about business, is this a business?
Mm-hmm.
If it's a business, start moving like it's a business. Put your LLC, get your corporation, put those things in place because it's a business. Especially if you're wanting to get sponsorships, you're wanting to have some type of community that comes forth from this. Like if you are hoping that other things kind of come forth from this podcast, start treating it like the business you want it to be. So I would say yes, you should have an LLC. Now, business names, right? Your business name doesn't necessarily need to be the same name as whatever is distinguishing you in commerce. What am I
Mm,
trying to say? You can have a business name that is different from a trademark. And that trademark can be an asset that belongs to the business. I'll give you an example. Think about the company P&G. If you're familiar with it, P&G has a whole lot of household items that they create. They create a lot of cleaning supplies, and they own all of these different supply companies. I think they might have like Huggies Pampers, not Huggies Pampers, but Huggies diapers. Um, they might also own Dawn, the hand
dish,
detergent,
yeah, the dish
right?
soap. Mm-hmm.
So they own all these different products, and those are all companies underneath it. But the large company that owns all these different things is called P&G. P&G isn't really, and that's Procter and Gamble, but they go by P&G.
Right.
So that's not really their brand name. Like it's become a brand because it's known for owning all these other things, but it's not what they're marketing in the stores. They're marketing the specific product names, right? And the specific companies that are associated with those products, right? And so what I'm trying to say is you want to start thinking about how that there can be a separation. And I've had clients that, because of privacy purposes, maybe they have an online business and they don't want people to trace things back to their company, right? I have folks who have a different business name than their brand name. I'll give you another example. So Harpo, right? This is the main business name that we can associate with Oprah, right? But
Mm-hmm.
her real name that she markets is Oprah, and she has Oprah magazine, she has Oprah film, or own the magazine. She has all these different brands underneath it. Another one, the Gap. The Gap is a company, but the Gap also has four different brands and different stores underneath it. And this becomes when you this is when people start thinking strategy, because this is when
Mm,
people start thinking about how am I organizing my assets. Now, I say all of this to say your trademarks
mm-hmm.
are assets that belong to a business, right? So your trademark name, so 24-hour boss could be a trademark that whatever your LLC is owns,
Mm,
just like any other type of property. The powerful thing about that, and that gets takes us back to again that licensing, it takes us back to partnerships, right? When you start structuring your things like that, it kind of frees you to be able to use these assets like products, or use these assets as assets for exchange of value. It allows you to kind of be a little bit more strategic in the way you present it to the world. So I've had folks who they have developed course content and developed not ideologies, but have developed methodologies that they have created specific names for, and we have registered copyrights for their workbooks and for their things that they have produced that they use to teach. But they are also able to license those products that they now own, because they're products underneath their business names, to various organizations that they're either speaking with or training on, and they're able to collect more profit. So that's where I'm really like, ideally, I would love to have a ton of clients who that's how they're moving. I'm trying to get people from where we are to
yeah.
that. So I always like to like drop those little like, I want to like get people like, ooh, I could do this. Yes, you could.
Yeah,
Yes, you could.
we need to think outside the box. Basically, is what you're saying, because
Yes.
there's so much we can do with our podcast, with our social channels, with our businesses that I know
Yes.
you could help enlighten us with it. But I mean, it's so much we could do, and
So much.
so much we can get to. So we got a question here. So a nonprofit can own a for-profit business.
So here's the thing, a nonprofit can own a business, but it can't really own a for profit business. So, because essentially, a nonprofit has no owners. From a legal perspective, if we're breaking down the technical difference between a nonprofit and a for profit business, is a nonprofit does not have owners. There is no shareholder, there
Right.
is no LLC member. So, whatever the profit is, it should not be going back to a person. So, when
Mm,
we're talking about can a nonprofit own a for profit business, there's a disconnect, because a bit so can a nonprofit make profit? Yes, it can make
hmm.
profit, but nobody can own it. It needs to go
Nobody can
back to
own
the
it.
business. It has
Goes
to
back
go
to the
back to the
business.
organization.
Right.
Exactly. So a nonprofit can sell things for sure. It can have an arm that is giving and providing X, Y, and Z, and that money is going back to the nonprofit to help that nonprofit do whatever it is that it does. Can that nonprofit pay people? Of course it can, right? Because it's paying people for the services that they provide so that the nonprofit can do the work that it does. But at the end of the day, if you have a nonprofit and that nonprofit ends up with $1 million of profit at the end of the year, that $1 million of profit belongs to the nonprofit,
The company.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's so from a legal technical perspective, I want to break it down in this way. The When you are forming a nonprofit, the language in your articles, the language in your certificate of formation should be telling the government, should be telling the LLC, especially if you're looking for tax deductibles. You want to make sure you're able to get tax deductions and things like that. The language there says that if your nonprofit were to cease to exist, any money that that nonprofit owns should be given back to another organization that is doing similar work. That's what the language says. So I really want to stress that your nonprofit has no owners. Your
Right.
nonprofit is to benefit the world, to benefit community.
Right. Because the money that it collects gives back to their services, and not to an
Exactly.
individual. Right. But
Exactly.
I think what that question is getting to. So I have quite a bit of friends. They have like faith based. Well, they have like faith based maybe like YouTube channel. You know, maybe it's a YouTube channel directed at ministry and different things. Maybe church related. So let me ask this: does that person that say has owns this YouTube channel, they don't have to set up their entity for that YouTube channel or business. they don't have to set that up as a nonprofit, right? That could be just it could be for profit or it could be a business, right? It doesn't have to be a
Yeah,
nonprofit just because it's
yeah,
ministry related, right? Or church related,
just
or well, not church related, but it's something that they have on their own. They don't have to set that entity or business up as a nonprofit. Is that right?
it's just a separate business. Exactly. And that's one of the things I would have people before people be like, I want to start a nonprofit. And I've, so I did, when I was teaching, I worked for Teach for America. That's a nonprofit. I'm involved in ministry at my church and things like that. I love nonprofits. I also think we have a ton of nonprofits. And I think what we need is profitable businesses. So sometimes I push against, I've been like, you know what? Don't create a nonprofit. Work with a nonprofit,
Yeah.
volunteer at the nonprofit, but create a profitable business. And
Create a
even if you,
profitable business. Yes.
yes, create a
You want to
profitable
make some money,
business.
right? I mean, it's not
Yes.
all about money, but if you're gonna have a service or if you're gonna put some time into it, like you've been saying, right? All of these things that we're doing, all of these creations and all this stuff is worth protecting, it's valuable. So you can also monetize it. I mean, that's just the game, right?
And here's the thing, nothing stops you from, once you've made money, giving that money to all the causes that you want to.
There you
This is
go.
not saying you can't help. So, and the thing is that if we, I pay attention to the different ministries that are out there, and I pay attention to the leaders in the different ministries. And I've heard many really amazing uh, ministry leaders that I've listened to, that I've paid attention to. And I look at their stuff and I pay attention. I'm like, I think that's a business. So I'll look and see. And so you'll see certain businesses that they have that, or certain ministries where they have large churches, but the heads, the leaders of those organizations have their own separate businesses. Those separate businesses are the ones that usually handle the things with regards to books that they do or speaking engagements that they do, right? It's not usually the same thing. Once you've given that to the nonprofit and you put it underneath that nonprofit's name, then that nonprofit owns it. So I'll put this out there because TD Jakes recently was on a podcast. He was on the Breakfast Club recently, and he was talking about it. And I thought this was so fascinating. He was like, people think that I just started my businesses. He said, if you go back and you look at the organizational documents, my TD Jakes businesses date back
Mm,
before Potter's House. He's like,
mm,
I was an entrepreneur and I've always been an entrepreneur. And I think that if we start to go back and we peel back the covers on some of these things, we'll probably see that as more common than we think. I think
right,
when you start looking at certain ministries, you'll start to see that there's the main ministry arm, but then there's also what that person does on the side or does whatever they do to encourage, to coach, to X, Y, and Z. That's probably their business. And I'm not mad at it. That some
right.
people are mad at it. That's a conversation for another day. I'm
Exactly.
not mad at it.
I mean,
I
hey,
yeah.
for many pastors, they do it full time, right? So, um, you know, yeah, like you said, that's a conversation for outside of this conversation. But if he sets up himself as a business or entity, I mean, I don't see nothing wrong with that. I think sometimes people can't separate the two. I think, and so that's where it could look kind of like maybe to
Mhm.
some eyes misleading and all that, but you
Mhm.
know he sets it up that way. So yeah, so we'll have that conversation another time, not on this one. But hey, that is great information. Great information. Okay, so in regards to podcast, I think you touched on it. So should they trademark their name?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think that if you're growing a brand, if you're growing a personal brand, or you're growing a brand, I think you should trademark it because I want you to have power. I think trademarking empowers you. Registering your trademark empowers you, I should say, because you
Yeah.
might already have a trademark, but you haven't empowered yourself with the trademark. What do I mean? You might have something that you put out there that identifies you as a source of a good or service. People see it and they think about you. They see this with anything, they think it's coming from you, right? But if somebody else were to come and try and use that name, can you stop them? You
Ooh.
probably can if you haven't registered it because you haven't empowered yourself by registering a trademark, right? And are you sure you're the only person who has it? Like if you haven't done that search, you haven't empowered yourself. If somebody does come and they try to use that name and they start to profit off of the hard work that you've done and that you've put in to develop the notoriety associated with this brand name, do you have any recourse to stop them? If you have not
Ooh.
registered your trademark, not really, because the United States Patent and Trademark is not going to let you bring a case or do bring a lawsuit against them without registering that trademark. And they don't care that it's going to take you up to a year to register that trademark. They're going to be like, well, sorry, you need to register your trademark before you can come into our courtroom.
Ooh. Ooh. Ouch.
Hmm.
So a person could register, someone could have take your name, even though you have it as a business, they could register that name as a trademark before you do, and they could be the one that comes out the winner.
Um, that's such a good question because it's one of those things. It's not, I wouldn't say it's complicated, but it's a little complicated
Right.
because when we start talking about, first thing is, remember your business bucket, like your LLC, your corporation, is a different area of the law and different types of rights than your trademark rules, right? So that's the first thing that I always like to distinguish is, and that's why I said your trademark is an asset that belongs to the business. That's how I always think about it. So that's the first ground rule. The second thing is that in the United States of America, it's very interesting. The rule is actually first in use has greater rights,
Mm,
generally speaking.
gotcha.
So in the United States, they're looking at who has used this mark first. So if you've been using this mark since 1994 and someone else just started using this mark yesterday, right? You technically have greater rights to it. But again, if you haven't registered that trademark and they go and they register that trademark and there's no proof anywhere in the world that you've used it because you're like, no, I really did, but there's no evidence, how is that person supposed to first and foremost know that there was another person who was using this mark, right? There's no way for them to know. And then how are you really establishing that you are the identified as the source of this good or service? One of the things in the trademark application is that they start asking you for examples of how you put this mark, whether it be a name, a logo, whatever, with that good or a service. So they're going to ask you for evidence at some point to say, hey, and that might be evidence that you're about to, or evidence that you are already using this mark in commerce. And so if you haven't done those things, how do you prove your case, essentially? So there are instances I've seen it. There's some stories. If you look at some of my older videos where I kind of break down a few video times where people kind of messed up with their trademark, um, uh, uh, not system, but the sequence that they use to kind of get their trademarks. Maybe they started in another country and they're coming to the U.S. and then somebody registered that trademark first in the U.S. and they were out of luck. So you want to be diligent, and the thing is that it takes a while. This is a time consuming process. It's not there's no expedited trademark process or, oh, I submit it tomorrow and then I can get a result next week and so then I can move my, no, there's still to this day no expedited trademark process, and it's taking them 9 months to just look at an application, not to finish it but to just say, oh, we're assigning it to this person to look at.
Oh,
So yeah, I just recommend, if you have something that is a unique identifier and you think it's that valuable, which you should if you believe in yourself, I want you to start working towards getting that trademarked, because it puts the world on notice that you have it and it allows you to have exclusivity and stop others from using it.
great advice, ma'am. Great advice. And I think you said it take, well, I was looking at your website. It takes about, how long does it take for a trademark? About a year or two, or how long does that take?
It varies. So, and it's gotten, after the pandemic, that extended their timeline. So right now, I have a number of clients that we submit their applications, and it's been taking at least 9 months before we get an examining attorney to look at it. And there's some videos that I have on my YouTube channel, where I talk about like the process, but there are different stages. So there's one stage where there's an examining attorney who looks over it, and then there might be some responses going back and forth. Then there's something called publication, and that's another stage, and then there's registration. And so those kind of, there's a lot of dependence as to what the government is doing that can take some time, and then also if there is going back and forth between the office, or between you, the applicant, and the United States Patent and Trademark Office, that could elongate the process. So what I've seen right now, um, the shortest ones that have been going through really quickly have been taking about a year. That's if there's no issues, and that's not common. There's usually something that we got to go back and forth about. But I would say at a minimum, expect a year, if not,
About a
18
year.
months.
Yeah. 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 But it's worth it. Definitely worth it. So, and that's something that Tammy can help us with, guys. So I want y'all to know that
Yes.
she can definitely help you with that. I mean, she's not only an attorney, but she's a business attorney. She knows business. She knows her stuff. I mean, this is a brain. This is a person worth having. This is a person worth having in your
Yes.
faves. definitely. So I'm
Yes.
telling you, she is definitely a great resource. But man, that is some great information. Okay, so Tammy, we're gonna get to this surprise question. I know we don't already stress some time, but you know what? Last time I think I had to break the episode up into two parts because it was so great, right? But
I remember.
I want to get to these surprise questions, and you've already answered surprise questions. Um, but I just have two for you, just two. Okay,
Okay.
so this first one is looking at things from your current vantage point, like through your experiences. You pivot from a teacher to an attorney. Um, would you change anything, or would you take like everything? Like, would you accept all of your experiences that you went through to see where you're at now?
Oh, oh, so good, so good. Um, I have over. I feel like I've just come to terms with I am a teacher at heart, and so
Yeah.
I would never. I don't think I'd take that experience away because it was so enriching, and it's something I feel like I was teaching family and friends before then, and I still teach now that I'm technically not a teacher, but I'm still a teacher. I love
Yes.
teaching. So
Yes.
I would not change that. Now I do wonder, like, I really like business, and I feel like I would have explored business in a different realm. I don't know how, but I feel like there's just still more to do in the business. But I don't know if I regret any part. Maybe, there's a couple of classes I would have taken. Like, there are a few. I would have changed my curriculum in some of my classes and be like, throw in a business class there and throw in this class here. That's what I probably would have changed the most.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
All right. All right. That's good. But well, I appreciate knowing that you went through those experiences because of course, you're very knowledgeable. So, you know, you're helping so many now. But
Thank
all right,
you.
cool. Okay, so this last surprise question, you've already answered it, but for those that maybe didn't see it, I actually have the video that I'm gonna share it. But I'll let you talk about it once we watch this 1 minute clip. Okay, 1 minute. We're gonna watch this clip. Surprise question. This is Temi asking the last surprise question.
Team Android Samsung all day, every day. It's so funny. I have my computer setup is Mac. I have iPads. All my other stuff is Mac, but I've never owned an iPhone ever. I've had an Android phone since the first Android, like Google 1G1. Like I had that phone, and then Samsung, all the subsequent ones, Notes. That's all I've ever had. So I am the person who proudly disrupts the group chat every time. Come for me if you want. All right. I've got no issue with that. I'm that green bubble in the midst of blue. There is nothing wrong. Being like everybody else is overrated. As I continue to type away on my MacBook.
Okay. So, last surprise question was Team iPhone, Team Samsung, and of course, Tammy is she says Team Samsung all the way,
Yep.
but she proudly proudly uses a MacBook. But
Yep.
any other words on that, Tammy? Any other words on that?
I'm consistent. Here's the iPad. Here's the Android. I'm a consistent person. It's not, I don't see it changing anytime soon.
Ah. I'm looking at some of these comments coming in. uh see, David, he just got the hands up, praise, praise God. My wife says, Tammy, no. Then C. Davies comes back, preach, Tammy, preach. Yes. But no, I just thought you versus me having you answer, I just share that video out there. So, but awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, Tammy, thank you so much for that. Looks like C. Davis says, all right, when is she coming back? We need a 3-day conference with this info. Most definitely. We'll have to we'll make arrangements and definitely have you back, Tammy. I don't know. It's so much to tackle, and but I would say for those that are watching, whatever questions you got, you can send them to me, and that way we can kind of or get with me or whatever, and we can kind of frame a subject matter or something that way we can have for Tammy and just go with it. But we definitely want to have you back, Tammy. Okay, so we're about to wrap this up. Okay, so Tammy, with our God-given abilities, do you believe that with the right mindset, there is anything we're trying to do is possible?
I do. I am that optimist, but I think I'm a I think I'm a realistic optimist. And so the question is not is it possible? It's like how much are you willing to do to get it? Right?
Mm,
Like that's really what it is. How long are you willing to wait? How much faith are you willing to utilize in order to get whatever that thing is? Because the things that people have done the impossible.
mhm.
The fact that we are communicating via live
Exactly.
on video with
Exactly.
hundreds of miles apart. We can get on
Hmm.
our phones and FaceTime people in other continents. That was impossible and is now possible. Like so I think when you sit back and you kind of like remind yourself of the impossible has occurred time and time and time and time and time again. But each time the impossible occurred, somebody had to take a step of faith. Somebody had to
Mm.
have long suffering and endure. Somebody had to have a vision despite not seeing everything else. And so those are that's kind of my perspective, but I absolutely believe that with the right mindset anything is possible.
Definitely. Yes, ma'am. Definitely. Amen to that. And of course, you're living proof of that. We all are, I guess. But I mean, you pivot from, like I said, being a teacher to an attorney. I mean, you're thought leader, you're author. You have all these, and still a teacher. You're still teaching people and helping people. So, um, great answer. Appreciate you and this information. This has been awesome, Tammy. This has been great. We definitely have to have you back. This is my
It's
wife again. She
fun.
says this was a great session. We needed all of this information. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you so much. I'm gonna get ready
It's
to
my
share.
pleasure.
Yes, yes. I'm gonna get ready to share your information here, and you can help me. But I think I have everything on here, so I believe everything is at TOS Legal. Is that right?
That is right. That is perfect.
Yes,
Yes.
TOS Legal. Of course, she also is. You can go to her website, toslegal.com. I think also, I saw that you have on your website. I think it's some kind of thing people can submit, like some kind of form, a start right form. Is that right? Did you have it on your website?
Yes. So I have a checklist that is available. If you are wondering, what are the steps that I need to take in order to establish my business, protect my brand, keep my profits? What are like the basic things? Because I have no idea. There is an awesome guide that we've created. So it's the level up your business and brand checklist. And so all you need to do is give us your email address, and you're going to get that. And you'll also get a couple of clips from a few of our other trainings that we've done where we talk about some business and brand elements as well. And there's just a ton of different things that we have a few courses actually that are also available on the website now that we didn't have before. So if you're wanting to learn a little bit more about like business foundations and things like that, just go to the website and the course tab, and there's access to that one. And then if you're trying to create your own Texas LLC, there's a course to kind of guide you through that as well. So resources abound, and we have more coming. I'm keeping my head down, and I'm trying to create things that I think are going to help people. So I'm really excited about what's coming. But that's what you have for now.
Awesome, awesome, great. And she also has a book. I think it's available on Amazon. Is it start? What is it? Start right? Um,
Start right. Yes. Eight
yes.
ways to jumpstart your business and protect yourself. So
Yes,
it's a nice little
available
quick
on
read.
Amazon. Yeah, available
Hmm.
on Amazon. I believe it's on. I think you have the what is that? What's the app? I can't think of it.
Kindle?
Kindle. Yes,
Yes.
but yes.
Yes.
So definitely listen. Hit up Miss Tammy. Connect with her on a website online. Like I said, she's on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Definitely go to her YouTube page. She has some great videos up that can help you in regards to trademarks and all of that. So she has great information that you can watch. Of course, YouTube is free, but also, you can connect with her, fill out the survey, and just get started. But Tammy, this has been awesome. I appreciate you. When I reached out to Tammy, I said, "Hey, Tammy, I saw your video that you did about trade making podcast." I said, "Hey, I think I need to have you on live." First thing you said is that sounds like that'll be fun. So I
And
appreciate
it
you and your
has been.
yeah, it's always fun when we get together. But I
Yeah.
appreciate you and your time. Like I said, we'll definitely have to have you back because, like I said, you're a wealth of information. Got to have Tammy on speed dial. But I appreciate you being here, Tammy. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. The great Temi Siyanbade.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. Appreciate all of you
My
joining and watching.
pleasure.
Yeah, thank you all for watching and thank you for your comments and just your encouragement and support. Appreciate you all being here. And hey, Thank you so much. We will see you guys in the next video. Temi, thank you so much. I guess you can hang on, but we'll see you guys in the next video. Y'all have a great evening. God bless.